Australia, an immense, rugged land of extremes, where nature breaks all the rules. In this harsh landscape and brutal climate, the most successful survivors are the kangaroos, a biological curiosity 15 million years in the making. They've endured by evolving in extraordinary ways. Their specialized stomachs squeeze nutrients out of vegetation few other animals can digest. In the pitiless Aussie sun, roos stay cool by licking their forearms. As the saliva evaporates, a dense network of blood vessels acts as a heat exchanger. Crawling around on all fours, kangaroos look awkward. However, when they shift into biped gear, these energetic bouncers take on the grace of ballerinas. Their hind legs have strong elastic tendons that store energy like powerful springs. In bursts of speed, kangaroos can hit 65 kilometers an hour, leaping 10 meters in a single bound. They fly over flat ground, climb rocky hillsides, and scramble through woodlands using less energy than any creature on four legs. Most remarkable are their astonishing feats of reproduction. A mother can actually regulate her pregnancy and control the time of birth, a life-saving skill during a drought. Kangaroos have adapted themselves to living all over the island continent, in lush, heavy rainfall regions and throughout the vast arid outback. But if they've perfected the art of survival in nature, they've been helpless against the incursions of man. Since the arrival of Europeans 200 years ago, kangaroos have been steadily slaughtered. With the spread of agriculture, they were seen as vermin threatening crops and pastures. Settlers were required to kill kangaroos, and rewards were paid for their scalps. Today, kangaroos are still accused of competing with farming and ranching. The government manages their population by licensing commercial shooters to kill about 4 million every year.
What really first got me into this was the cruelty to them, and the killing of so many when it was so absolutely not necessary. And that's what's kept me going all these years.
Marjorie Wilson is one of Australia's most passionate animal welfare activists. For over 30 years, she's protested the mistreatment of kangaroos and fought against the commercialisation of Australian wildlife.
I've always loved animals, right from when I was a very small child, and I've always had pets. As a matter of fact, in the Depression, I used to bring all the stray dogs home to get fed. Then I got into the story of wildlife and realised what was happening to our kangaroos and how people were abusing them. So I thought, well, I'd better start and help there.
Organising rallies, writing petitions and speaking in the media, Marjorie's been a key player in bringing wildlife issues to public attention. In 1979, she was awarded the prestigious Order of Australia.
Would you like some carrots?
Marjorie has always practiced what she's preached. Through her kangaroo protection cooperative, she created a sanctuary near Sydney for injured or orphaned animals. Over the years, she's released more than 1,000 joeys back into the wild. A few kangaroos that might not survive on their own, like 16-year-old Katie, are allowed to graze through their golden years at KPC. Lynette Campbell got hooked on kangaroos working as a caretaker at the sanctuary.
But she looks pretty healthy to me.
No, she looks good.
Lynette's scientific skills complement Marjorie's talents as an organiser.
We feed the joeys, we nurse them when they're sick, give them their medicines, keep them warm, keep them dry, and release them when they're ready to go.
With Eastern Greys, the hope is that joeys join up with an established community. These mobs range from a few animals to about 50. They maintain home ranges, foraging together on grasses and leaves. Because dingoes and foxes can kill up to 80% of the joeys in a season, everyone takes a shift on surveillance duty. There are over 40 species of kangaroos and wallabies. Some are claimed to be in plague proportions, while others are critically endangered. Caught up in a conservation struggle, their very survival may hang in the balance. Kangaroo society is neatly divided by sex. Eastern grey females live with their family group and stay in their mother's home range throughout their lives. Young males, on the other hand, venture off to join different mobs, each one hoping for his chance to stir up the gene pool. Finding a partner is a full-time job. There's no specific mating season, so females must be continually inspected. When receptive, her urine is imbued with an enticing flavour. High-ranking males compete for the right to mate, and a successful suitor must defend his status. An interloper attempts a sneak attack. The head honcho responds by drawing the proverbial line in the sand. The warning delivered, he resumes his search for Ms. Right. It can take a male 8 years of struggling with his rivals to make it to the top, and he can lose his crown at any time. Females want only the best genes for their offspring and lead aspiring fathers on until they've proven themselves worthy. Even while savouring the spoils of war, the victor must stay on guard for usurpers waiting in the wings. Kangaroo reproduction is a wonder of nature. Just 3 to 4 weeks after mating, the tiny infant emerges from the birth canal. Blind and weighing less than a gram, the bean-sized joey crawls up the mother's belly to her pouch and bids the outside world goodbye for another 5 months. After the joey emerges to plant its big feet on terra firma, the pouch will remain its cradle for several months more. An adult female spends most of her life with a joey in the pouch. When she's killed, whether by a bullet or a bumper, there's a good chance her joey survives, at least for a while. The lucky ones are rescued and hand-reared in private homes. Throughout Australia, a loosely organised network of caregivers provide refuge for foundling marsupials. Most of these women lack any training, get no funding, and are given a rough ride by government agencies. For the joeys, however, the carers are their only chance.
Wallace and Grey?
No, there's a couple of swamp wallabies.
Lynette Campbell visits caregivers around New South Wales and learns about their work, how the joeys are raised and what happens when they're released.
You keep them inside, don't you?
Her postgraduate thesis looks at how different techniques of hand-rearing may affect the survival of joeys in the wild.
Part of the nature of rearing joeys is the amount of warmth that you get back from the animals. They'll groom you, they'll nibble your ears and all sorts of little things like that. A good carer will respond according to what the animal seems to need. It's about attaining a balance where you give them what they need in terms of care, just as the mother kangaroo would. And then as it starts to grow up, you pull that back and allow it the independence that it needs to develop to a mature animal that's going to survive in the wild. Kangaroos have been hand-reared for a very long time, but there's been very little research into what actually happens after you let them go. So that's really where my work fits in. Marjorie's been rearing and releasing kangaroos for some 20 years and has had to sort of trust in fate that they would be all right, which probably they were, but it's good to also have that information. So this work will hopefully prove that they will survive in the wild, and so the work is worthwhile.
Lynette takes careful note of each joey's behaviour, looking for indicators predicting how they'll fare on their own. These joeys have thrived at their orphanage and are almost ready to be released. Playful sparring prepares the juvenile males for bigger battles in a real mob. It's a jungle out there, and for aspiring Casanovas, the odds aren't very good. Even though females outnumber males 2 to 1, only the tough guys get in on the action. Juveniles start learning the moves early, more for fun and status. As they age, the mock battles become more serious, while their claws and muscles develop into dangerous weapons. When 2 heavyweight contenders clash in a title bout, there are no holds barred. It's Liberation Day for this gang of youngsters. Before they taste freedom, however, a game of catch a joey by the tail.
Come on, darling.
You put so much time and effort into it and see them really developing and becoming something wonderful. And then you let them go, and the release method that I used in the first place I wasn't happy with, and the animals went through a lot of stress, and I wasn't sure that they survived. And it was devastating, and I really wanted to find out how you can ensure that all that work isn't in vain.
Okay.
Done very long.
5 little joeys, all snug in their sacks, for the 3-hour drive ahead.
There he is. Off to Mudgee we go.
Finding the right home for hand-reared joeys isn't easy. Eastern greys like the same kind of land used by farmers, where kangaroos are seen as a nuisance and controlled by guns. However, Lynette has found a 60,000-acre ranch whose owner doesn't mind kangaroos on his property. It's the ideal place to release the joeys and study their lives in the wild.
That's better. That's what you did it for.
One of your tails.
Is this the one that had 1.5 million? Legs are all tangled.
It's your legs.
After all the work, it's hard to say goodbye.
Yeah. They hurt themselves. But that's fine. That's perfect. And the moment of actually seeing them when they hop off into the hills, there's nothing really like that. Just waiting for that moment when you can see them go and be free is fabulous.
Through the magic of radio, Lynette rediscovers a kangaroo she'd rescued, bruised and battered, from his dead mother's pouch.
That's Toby. He's giving a really good strong signal now. He's been out for about 15 months, so it's good to see him because I may get signals but not always see them because of the terrain. And he's down there with a group of boys hanging around with what's called a bachelor mob, where he'll stay until he develops a few muscles to begin to challenge the males for a bit of a more dominant role. He was quite wild, very difficult to catch, and didn't like people handling him at all. Yet after a few weeks in the wild, there's no difference. They seem to be the same as the wild kangaroos themselves. So he's doing really well.
Six months pregnant and 200 miles from home, Lynette needs an easier way to gather data. She's set up a remote logging system that tracks her joeys constantly. Every few weeks, she gathers the precious records beamed to the station from the radio collars in the field.
Once I get home, I need to convert the information that I downloaded into the computer down there so that it's in a small enough form to analyse. I can determine which animals do survive and which don't. I can also compare that to information that I've got from individual carers. I'll analyse that data and relate it to the individuals that have been released with collars and see if I can find what factors it is that is rearing successful joeys that survive and rearing ones which may not.
A female kangaroo is the ultimate supermom, perpetually pregnant and completely absorbed with raising her young. At any one time, she may have 3 joeys on the go. A dormant fertilized embryo, a joey growing in the pouch, and a third at foot still nursing. In fact, she produces 2 different kinds of milk, a low-fat formula for the pouch young and a high-fat, high-protein blend for the active joey on the go. Juggling multiple joeys is a great survival skill. It ensures that there's always a fertilized embryo on the back burner to replace a pouch young that's killed or may die during drought. As the older joey gradually eats more vegetation and drinks less milk, the mother's hormones reactivate the development of the embryo. As soon as this joey is weaned, the mother gives birth, then mates, and the cycle of life is renewed once more. For kangaroos, the biggest natural threat is drought. Scorching desert heat can dry up waterholes and vegetation for long periods. If the drought persists, up to 70% of the mob may perish. In the higher rainfall areas, where most of Australia's intensive farming is done, kangaroo populations have been hit hard. However, it seems their reputation as a threat to ranching may be a bum rap. Research has shown that sheep and kangaroos eat different vegetation and only compete during a drought. Nevertheless, their bad name provides a convenient rationale for slaughter. Australia's kangaroo industry is worth over $20 million a year. The largest segment is the international trade in hides. The meat is processed and sold mainly for pet food. Souvenirs and novelty items for tourists are another important market. Unfortunately, what's good for the export trade may not be good for the species.
The most worrying problem is that if you establish a market, then that market is most likely going to be fulfilled regardless of fluctuations in the kangaroo population numbers. And in a country like Australia, they fluctuate to an enormous degree. If there's a drought, they may not breed at all for 3 or 4 years, and if culling continues through that same time, then all the biggest, strongest animals will be taken, leaving a weak breeding pool to continue the generation, making them more susceptible to all sorts of problems in the future.
The people that they're fighting against really are the people who want to exploit our native animals. We just don't realise what we've got here, and this is the big problem. People, the dollar sign looms high, and when that gets there through, their minds get clouded, I'm afraid.
If kangaroos are used for meat, for fur, for leather, then that's how they will be perceived. People won't recognise their intrinsic value as wildlife, as animals in their own right, beyond the realms of the human world. Everything is linked together, and in the long term, if we damage this wild species, we're really damaging ourselves.
It seems the kangaroo is an Australian scapegoat, deflecting attention from real problems that run much deeper.
A lot of Australia is not arable land. It's simply not productive enough to run sheep and cattle and wheat. And by doing that, you're turning it into a desert, essentially. Vast tracts of Australia has been completely deforested. But people still try and farm that land and are subsidised by the government to do so.
Well, people say it's an emotional issue. You're just going overboard. And I say, I'm not going overboard. It is an emotional issue. If you would get killed, somebody would get emotional about you. And therefore, I feel we've got to fight for the animal, otherwise we'll lose them.
Oh, Rollington's good.
In a country that simply oozes testosterone, these women aren't your typical scrappers. Yet despite Marjorie's failing knees and Lynette's own Joey in the pouch, they continue to fight.
We've got to stand up and be counted. Otherwise, if you don't stand up and be counted, then the whole issue will fade away. And I hope that there'll be many people to take over after me. I'm a senior citizen, so I'm not going to be around that much longer. But I hope that I can inspire some of the younger ones to come in and to do their part then when I go.
Through the ages, kangaroos have evolved with Australia. Yet in just 200 years, humans have tamed this vast wild continent. Today, the resilient bounders are letting us know that we may have gone too far. Whether we listen or just shoot the messenger will determine their fate.